Jose Goa Jimenez apologized for dealing a large amount of heroin in this area.
In the dark underworld of organized crime, the whispers of power, money, and secret dealings echo through the corridors of the illicit world. But what happens when the hammer of justice falls, and those once untouchable figures face the reality of a life behind bars?
Notorious drug lord Joaquin El Chapo Guzman was back in federal court today.
But amidst the chaos and despair, questions arise. What exactly drives individuals to pledge loyalty to these criminal gangs? How do they cope when their walls of protection come crashing down? Join us as we unravel 10 cartel members reacting to life sentences. Number 10. Jose Goa Jimenez. Jose Goa Jimenez, a once powerful figure within the ranks of a notorious Mexican cartel, had risen through the ranks to become a key player in the organization's heroin trafficking operation. Operating with ruthless efficiency, Jimenez oversaw the smuggling of vast quantities of heroin into Columbus, Ohio, exploiting the city's strategic location for distribution across the region. In addition to orchestrating the trafficking of heroin into Columbus, Jimenez's operation was known for its ruthless tactics in maintaining control over the drug trade. Reports indicated rival gangs were often forced into submission or eliminated altogether, solidifying Jimenez's dominance in the underworld. The investigation into Jimenez's activities revealed a network of secret operations, with shipments of heroin concealed in various vehicles and transported through secret routes to escape law enforcement detection. Using experienced communication channels and code messages, he and his associates coordinated their illicit activities precisely, leaving little trace of their bad dealings. Furthermore, law enforcement officials uncovered a secret network of distribution center points and safe houses used by him and his associates to store and transport heroin throughout the city. This network spanned multiple states, making it challenging for authorities to pull down. Despite the risks involved, his operation proved really profitable, with the heroin trade generating millions of dollars in illicit proceeds. The rush of hard drug heroin into Columbus fires up a flow in addiction and related crime, bringing problems to the city's communities and straining law enforcement resources. His iron grip on the drug trade was boosted by a reputation for violence and intimidation, with reports of rival gang members and potential informants meeting deadly fates at the hands of his dictator. This climate of fear made it exceedingly difficult for authorities to gather evidence and secure convictions against him and his group. As the case against Jimenez spread out in the courtroom, details of his extravagant lifestyle and extravagant spending emerged, painting a picture of a man driven by greed and power. Lavish homes, luxury vehicles, and extravagant parties were just a few evidence of Jimenez's dirty, illegal gains, further illustrating the human cost of his criminal enterprise. Despite a weak attempt at an apology, delivered briefly through an interpreter, Jimenez failed to sway Judge Kimberly Coft. She swiftly delivered a harsh sentence of 21 years in prison, ensuring his deportation upon completion of his term. Unmoved by the prospect of spending his final years behind bars, he exited the courtroom with a disrespectful expression, looking calm, cool, and collected by the consequences of his crimes. Number 9. Angie Valencia. Angie Valencia's rise to fame was not merely a result of her stunning looks, but also her tricky ability and strategic cleverness. Before venturing into the drug trade, she had already established herself as a successful model and beauty queen, winning numerous awards and gaining widespread recognition in Colombia's entertainment industry. Born on May 25, 1977, in Colombia, her passage into the drug trade began after she won a beauty pageant in the early 2000s. Following a breakup with her boyfriend, a prominent drug lord known as El Monstro, she decided to draw her own path in the criminal underworld. Dubbed the Cleopatra of cocaine, she possessed a captivating beauty that she skillfully used to manipulate men, including law enforcement officials, to turn a blind eye to her bad activities. She has an experienced drug trafficking team, transporting cocaine from Argentina to England, concealed in briefcases and bags. However, it was her personal connections that ultimately pushed her into the world of organized crime. Her romantic involvement with El Monstro, a notorious drug lord with ties to the Mexican cartels, provided her with invaluable insights and resources to establish her own criminal enterprise. With her boyfriend's guidance and support, she founded her cartel, recruiting a team of models who served as couriers and helped conceal their illegal activities under the belief of legitimate business ventures. This included utilizing their connections in the fashion and entertainment industries to facilitate the smuggling of drugs across international borders undetected. Moreover, her ability to escape capture for several years speaks volumes about her adaptability and resourcefulness. However, Valencia's empire came crashing down when one of her models, Ariel, was apprehended at Aiza International Airport in Argentina with a substantial amount of cocaine in her possession. Under interrogation, Ariel implicated Valencia, prompting Interpol to issue a warrant for her arrest. She escaped capture, but was found hiding in a local hostel under a false name. On May 27, 2010, just 2 days after her 31st birthday, she was imprisoned. She was sentenced to life in prison after being convicted of multiple charges related to drug trafficking, money laundering, and violent crimes. Known for her ruthlessness and cunning tactics within the cartel, Valencia maintained a stoic demeanor throughout her trial. However, upon hearing the judge's verdict of a life sentence, her facade cracked, and she displayed a rare moment of vulnerability. Despite attempts to maintain her composure, tears welled in her eyes as she realized the gravity of her situation. Her reaction, though brief, offered a glimpse into the human behind the hardened criminal persona, reflecting the profound impact of her sentencing on her life and legacy within the criminal underworld. Number 8. Jeremy Christian. Jeremy Christian, a member of the Ku Klux Klan (KKK), a notorious white racist group, was sentenced to life imprisonment for committing a horrific crime. The KKK is considered a terrorist organization by the U.S. government due to its history of targeting various minority groups such as African Americans, Jews, Latinos, Asian Americans, Catholics, immigrants, and homosexuals. This hateful organization has carried out bad acts, including murder, bombings, vandalism, and spreading hate speech to intimidate and oppress its victims in pursuit of their warped ideology of white supremacy. Born and raised in Portland, Oregon, he became demoralized by online violent communities that live on unsafe individuals seeking a sense of belonging. Despite growing up in a relatively different city, his deep-seated racism and intolerance led him into a life of violence and hatred. In May 2017, he unleashed a brutal attack on 2 passengers on a MAX train, ultimately stabbing them to death. The victims included a 53-year-old man named Ricky Best and another individual, Nam Kamechi, who tried to intervene. Before the attack, he had verbally abused 2 teenage girls, one of whom was African American and the other an immigrant from Somalia. He poured out hate-filled power of speech targeting Muslims, Christians, Jews, and others, and even physically assaulted Kamichi and destroyed his phone when he tried to record the incident. Witnesses described a scene of chaos and terror as he brought a knife and unleashed a flow of racial abuse and threats. His victims, including Ricky, a military veteran and father of 4, and Kamichi, were caught off guard by the sudden and senseless attack. In the aftermath of the tragedy, the Portland community rallied together in solidarity against hate and racism, condemning his actions and standing in support of the victims and their families. Vigils and memorials were held to honor the lives lost and to call for justice and accountability. The swift and decisive action taken by law enforcement and the judicial system sent a clear message that acts of domestic terrorism and hate crimes would not be tolerated. However, the scars left by his cruel actions serve as a clear reminder of the ongoing threat posed by extremist ideologies and the urgent need for vigilance and unity in combating them. During his trial, he initially fakes remorse, appearing sober and tearful. However, his true nature was revealed when he directed threats and insults towards one of his previous victims, displaying his unrepentant hatred and violence. This outburst led the judge to hand down a life sentence without the possibility of bail, recognizing Christian as a dangerous and real racist. Number 7. El Chapo. El Chapo, whose real name is Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, rose to shame as one of the most notorious drug lords in history. Born in a poor rural area of Sinaloa, Mexico, He began his criminal career in the 1970s, initially cultivating marijuana and heroin fields. By the 1980s, Guzman had joined the ranks of the Cali Cartel, where he quickly rose through the ranks due to his intelligence, ruthlessness, and ability to evade law enforcement. He eventually became the head of his own cartel, the Sinaloa Cartel, which became one of the most powerful and prolific drug trafficking organizations in the world. He quickly gained notoriety for his efficient drug smuggling from Mexico to the United States. He earned the nickname El Chapo. He was arrested in Guatemala and handed over to Mexico, only to escape from a maximum security prison in Jalisco in 2001 by reportedly bribing prison officials and hiding in a laundry cart. This audacious escape only added to his legend and cemented his reputation as a master of evasion. In 2016, El Chapo was recaptured and subsequently sent to the United States for trial. In February 2019, he was found guilty by a federal court after a 3-month trial, which featured captivating evidence and testimonies from 14 cooperating witnesses. The trial revealed the elaborate methods used by him and his organization to smuggle banned substances into the United States, using fishing boats, submarines, airplanes with secret sections, and underground tunnels. During his reign, he was responsible for flooding the United States with billions of dollars worth of cocaine, heroin, methamphetamine, and marijuana. He utilized an extensive network of smuggling routes, including underground tunnels beneath the U.S.-Mexico border, to transport drugs into the United States. Despite his criminal activities, he was also known for his extravagant lifestyle, which included luxurious mansions, private jets, and even a zoo filled with exotic animals. His wealth and influence made him a larger-than-life figure in the world of organized crime. In addition to his drug trafficking charges, he was also implicated in numerous acts of violence, including murders, kidnappings, and acts of intimidation against rival cartels and government officials. His brutal tactics earned him a fearsome reputation and made him a top priority for law enforcement agencies on both sides of the border. His capture and extradition to the United States in 2017 marked the end of an era for the Sinaloa Cartel. His trial in 2019 was a great event that captured the world's attention and exposed the inner workings of one of the most notorious criminal organizations in history. He was sentenced to life imprisonment plus an additional 30 years for his leadership role in the cartel. Additionally, he was ordered to forfeit a staggering $12.6 billion. Despite the severity of his sentence, he remained emotionless as his verdict was being read. Number 6. Dexter Lee Williams. Dexter Lee Williams displays a chilling attitude similar to that of a statue, but in his case, someone else is getting worked up on his behalf. During his sentencing at the Houston County Superior Court, Williams, a 53-year-old drug lord, is facing the consequences of his actions after being convicted of violating the Misconduct and Corrupt Organizations Act. His conviction started from drug trafficking charges, with police alleging that he led a multi-million-dollar trafficking operation between Mexico and Atlanta. When arrested, Williams was found in possession of 39 kilos of cocaine valued at $3.5 million. The prosecution presents a mountain of evidence against him, including wiretap recordings, some footage, and testimonies from informants. These pieces of evidence paint a condemning picture of Williams's involvement in a deadly drug trafficking operation spanning across state lines. His lavish lifestyle is laid bare during the trial for all to see. He flaunted his ill-gotten gains with expensive cars, luxury properties, and extravagant parties. The prosecution argues that his flashy lifestyle was funded by the suffering and addiction of countless individuals grabbed by his drug empire. As the sentencing hearing progresses, the courtroom becomes a battleground of emotions. Judge Bo Adams delivers an extremely critical accusation of his crimes, drawing inspiration from spectators and murmurs of agreement from various people. He remained undisturbed, his expression unreadable, as if he's resigned himself to whatever fate awaits him. Meanwhile, his defense attorney mounts a series of defenses, leaving no stone unturned in her efforts to sway the judge in her client's favor. She calls upon character witnesses, presents mitigating factors, and challenges the credibility of the prosecution's evidence. Yet, Despite her patient efforts, the overwhelming weight of the evidence against Williams proves too much. As the judge pronounced the sentence, the moment's gravity hung heavy in the air. 40 years without parole, an effective lifetime behind bars. His supporters in the gallery were shocked in disbelief, while his adversaries nodded in satisfaction. It was a moment of relief for many, a small measure of justice for those whose lives have been shattered by his criminal enterprise. It was as though he'd expected the outcome and showed no signs of remorse. As the sentence was read out, he remained defiant, refusing to acknowledge any wrongdoing and maintaining his hardened demeanor. Despite the gravity of the situation, he showed no visible reaction, demonstrating the resilience and unrepentant nature that characterized his criminal career. Now it's time for today's subscriber's pick. El Diablo, whose real name was Alejandro Vasquez, was a notorious cartel leader in southern Mexico. He had risen through the ranks of the criminal underworld with ruthless efficiency, and his name struck fear into the hearts of both law enforcement and rival gangs alike. Many attempts to arrest him by the Mexican authorities have yielded no results. But now, after years of evading capture, his luck had run out. Found guilty on multiple charges ranging from drug trafficking to murder, the sentence handed down was the harshest of them all: life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Here was the notorious El Diablo standing before the judge, his fate sealed in the hands of the law. As the judge's words echoed through the courtroom, El Diablo stood unmoved, his chiseled features betraying no emotion. But behind the mask of indifference, a storm raged within him. Memories flashed before his eyes, of the streets he once ruled with an iron fist, of the allies he had betrayed and enemies he had vanquished. As the guards escorted him out of the courtroom, El Diablo cast one last glance over his shoulder, his eyes ablaze with a fierce determination. Though shackled and bound, he knew that his spirit would never be caged. Do you think there could be much tougher court verdicts for arrested cartel members? Let us know your opinions in the comments below. Number 5. Marciano Vasquez. Marciano Vasquez, a former member of a notorious drug cartel known as Los Zetas, provided chilling testimony about the brutal executions he witnessed during his time with the organization. In court, Vasquez revealed that he had personally seen between 70 to 80 executions carried out by the Zetas in Mexico. However, this number decreases the importance in comparison to the true extent of his involvement in violence and crime. Marciano Vasquez's involvement with Los Zetas extended beyond mere execution and violence. He played a key role in being the brain behind the cartel's operations, including the coordination of drug trafficking routes and the establishment of alliances with corrupt officials and rival gangs. On March 18, 2015, he and his groups carried out a horrific act of violence, kidnapping approximately 300 people from a remote Mexican village. Shockingly, they ordered the killing of at least half of the abducted individuals. One particularly deadly incident from 2013 involved him setting a 6-year-old girl on fire while forcing her parents to watch. He then proceeded to burn her mother and father, effectively wiping out an entire family in one day. He held a position of power within Los Zetas, known for their extreme brutality and criminal activities. Under his leadership, the cartel engaged in crazy acts such as cutting off heads, eating human flesh, and removing some vital organs from their victims. The leader of Los Zetas during Vasquez's tenure was known as El Verdugo, or the Executioner, highlighting the organization's cruelty. Beyond violence, he was deeply involved in various criminal enterprises, including drug trafficking, arms dealing, pornography, and human trafficking. He worked closely with prominent Mexican politicians to facilitate these illicit activities, ensuring the smooth passage of drug shipments through corrupt means. Despite his reign of terror, his crimes caught up with him, and he was arrested in 2015. He was ultimately sentenced to 7 life sentences for his numerous charges, including murder, conspiracy, and drug offenses. Images from the courtroom showed him visibly terrified, realizing that he would spend the rest of his life behind bars. In a final twist, his legacy continued as his son, Marciano Milan Vasquez, followed in his footsteps and was also sentenced to 3 consecutive life sentences for his involvement in the Los Zetas drug cartel. Number 4. George Gould Thomas. George Gould. Thomas's rise to power within South Africa's criminal underworld was marked by a series of violent incidents and power struggles. Born and raised in the poverty-stricken Cape Flats region of Cape Town, Thomas was exposed to gang activity from a young age. He quickly rose through the ranks of the 26 Gang, known for its ruthless tactics and territorial disputes. His reputation for brutality earned him the respect of his peers and instilled fear in his enemies. His leadership style was characterized by charisma, intimidation, and strategic tricks. He recruited a loyal following of gang members willing to carry out his orders without question, further consolidating his power. Despite his criminal activities, he was not protected from the law. He faced numerous brushes with law enforcement throughout his criminal career, including arrests for assault, armed robbery, and drug trafficking. However, his ability to escape lengthy prison sentences only bolstered his image as an untouchable figure within the criminal underworld, with over 50 charges ranging from murder to criminal behaviors. Locals thought they'd finally get some rest upon his eventual arrests and sentencing, but they were wrong. As the judge pronounced the verdict, Thomas maintained a calm demeanor, showing no visible signs of emotion. Throughout the trial, he remained defiant, refusing to show remorse for his actions. Despite the severity of the sentence, Thomas simply nodded, accepting his fate without protest. Behind his impassive exterior, however, some speculated that he harbored resentment and a determination to continue his criminal pursuits even from behind bars. So, despite being locked up, he continued to inject his influence, planning multiple murders from behind bars. His iron grip on his gang was evident as 6 of his associates were also sentenced to life imprisonment for their involvement in his crimes. His reign of terror reached its peak in the early 2000s, when he planned a series of high-profile murders and assassinations targeting rival gang leaders and witnesses. His involvement in these crimes was carefully planned, often carried out with military precision to eliminate potential threats to his power. The trial leading to Thomas's conviction was a landmark case in South Africa's ongoing battle against organized crime. It exposed the inner workings of the country's most notorious gangs, revealing the extent of their influence and the challenges faced by law enforcement in fighting their activities. His influence continued to be felt within the criminal underworld. He maintained control over his gang through a network of loyal associates who carried out his orders on the outside. This ability to operate from within prison only added to his mystery and further raised his reputation as a fearsome and untouchable figure. In the end, his downfall came not from his own group, but from the relentless pursuit of justice by law enforcement and the bravery of witnesses willing to testify against him. His conviction served as a victory for the rule of law and a warning to others seeking to follow in his footsteps. Though he may have been imprisoned, his legacy of violence and terror continues to cast a shadow over South Africa's communities. Number 3. Jessica Gonzalez. Jessica Gonzalez's name may sound familiar if you've heard of the notorious drug lord El Meño from Mexico. Jessica is his daughter, but unlike her father, she ends up on the wrong side of the law. She was born on July 23, 1986, in San Francisco, California, to Nezio El Meno Huacantes and Rosalinda Gonzalez Valencia. After spending some time in the U.S., she went to Mexico, where she earned a degree in marketing from a university in Guadalajara. However, she eventually got involved in her father's drug trafficking business, helping to launder money for the CJNG through various illegal enterprises, including a sushi restaurant, a resort, a tequila brand, and more. Her upbringing was far from ordinary, as she was raised in the shadow of her father's criminal empire. El Meño, also known as Ruben Oseguera Cervantes, is the leader of the Jalisco New Generation Cartel CJNG, one of the most powerful and violent drug cartels in Mexico. With a $10 million reward on his head, El Meño has escaped capture for years, leaving his family to face the consequences of his actions. In February 2020, Jessica's world crashed when she was arrested by U.S. authorities while attending a court hearing for her brother Ruben. The charges against her included violating the Foreign Narcotics Kingpin Designation Act and engaging in financial transactions with the CJNG. Despite her claims of limited contact with her father since childhood, Prosecutors saw her as a valuable source of information on the operations. During her trial, she offered very little insight into her true feelings or motivations. A single photograph taken during her arraignment captured her emotionless expression, leaving observers to speculate about the inner trouble she may have been experiencing. She pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 2 years in prison, along with a heavy fine. Her time behind bars was spent at a low-security federal correctional institution in Dublin, California, where she was kept away from the spotlight that had once shone so brightly on her family's criminal exploits. Upon her release in March 2022, Jessica emerged from prison with a newfound sense of freedom, but also a lingering sense of shame and regret. Number 2. Wallace Bigger. Wallace Bigger, known for his lavish lifestyle, was a prominent figure in Antrim County, Michigan. Despite his rich appearance, he operated discreetly, arranging an advanced network for the distribution of prescription drugs. His operation lasted for several years, during which he stylishly obtained thousands of heroin pills and other controlled medications from a doctor. The 71-year-old remained resistant throughout his trial, protesting his innocence and criticizing the legal system. He even attempted to dismiss his lawyer multiple times and claimed law enforcement officials framed him. His ways of approaching drug trafficking involved utilizing various locations across the county to sell his illicit goods. From rundown storefronts to secret meetups in remote areas, he escaped law enforcement questioning with cunning precision. However, despite the lucrative profits, his personal life was far from glamorous. He lived in a camper van on his daughter's driveway. His existence was a sharp opposition to the image of wealth he projected. Yet, even in his makeshift home, he maintained an appearance of assumption, refusing to acknowledge his guilt and condemning the legal system that sought to hold him accountable. Throughout his trial, his courtroom behavior captivated the public's attention. His confrontations with his legal counsel and outbursts against the prosecution became news for local headlines. Despite his advanced age, he revealed a determination that misrepresents his years, severally claiming his innocence even as the evidence mounted against him. As the trial reached its climax, tensions ran high. Prosecutors painted him as the mastermind behind a drug empire, emphasizing the harm inflicted on the community by his actions. Meanwhile, his defense team scrambled to dismantle the prosecution's case, resorting to desperate attempts to bring doubt into the minds of everyone. Ultimately, Judge Philip Rogers delivered a verdict that re-echoed throughout Antrim County. Bigger, once a symbol of wealth and power, was sentenced to spend the remainder of his days behind bars. His confrontational face finally cracked as he was led away from the courtroom, revealing a glimpse of the man behind the mask. In his eyes, there was a hint of regret, recognition of the consequences of his actions. Yet it was too late for redemption. Wallace Bigger, the once respected drug lord of Antrim County, had fallen from grace, leaving behind a legacy tarnished by greed and fraud. Number 1. Jorge Costilla Sanchez. Jorge Costilla Sanchez, known by his alias El Cos, was not just any ordinary police officer before his rise to power in the Gulf Cartel. He had a reputation for being a cunning and ruthless enforcer, even during his time in law enforcement. It is rumored that he used his position to establish connections with local criminals and lay the groundwork for his future in the drug trade. He had served as a police officer in Matamoros, a Mexican border town. He assumed leadership of the cartel following the arrest of its former boss, Ociel Cardenas. Eventually, he was taken to the United States to face charges related to drug trafficking, with a heavy $5 million reward offered for his capture. His capture in 2012 was a major coup for Mexican authorities, as he was considered a ringleader in the Gulf Cartel's operations. In 2015, he was sentenced to 20 years in prison in the United States after pleading guilty to drug trafficking charges. His reaction to the sentencing was one of stoic acceptance, as he had been aware of the potential consequences of his actions. Despite his incarceration, Costilla Sanchez's influence in the cartel world continued to be felt, albeit to a lesser extent, as the organization adapted to his absence. His arrest was the culmination of years of inspection and intelligence gathering by both Mexican and U.S. law enforcement agencies. The lavish display of gold-plated guns and jewelry seized from him served as a good reminder of the lavish lifestyle enjoyed by cartel leaders, funded by the misery of countless lives destroyed by drug addiction and violence. After his extradition to the United States, details emerged about Costilla's vast criminal empire. He was not only involved in drug trafficking but also in other illicit activities, such as money laundering, extortion, and even organizing violent attacks against rival cartels and law enforcement officials. His sentencing to life in prison on September 2017 marked the end of an era for the Gulf Cartel, but it also underscored the resilience of drug trafficking organizations in Mexico. Despite the capture of high-profile leaders like Costilla, the cartels continue to adapt and progress, finding new ways to escape law enforcement and maintain their stranglehold on the drug trade. Moreover, his case highlighted the complex relationship between the United States and Mexico in combating drug trafficking. While deportation and joint operations between the two countries have led to significant victories, they have also drawn diplomatic relations and raised questions about the effectiveness of the war on drugs. Interestingly, Costilla's sentencing coincided with Mexico's lower house voting to extend the policing powers of the country's army until 2028, reflecting ongoing efforts to address rising violence associated with drug cartels. His background as a former police officer served as a reminder that not all cartel leaders come from outside the home of law enforcement. In the end, Costilla's story serves as a cautionary story about the attraction of power and wealth in the world of organized crime, as well as the enduring challenge of eradicating drug trafficking and its associated violence. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video.